computer. All right.
Well, before we get started, I'd like to make sure you all are clear on the pronunciation of our last name, Byrne. Silent H, as in herb. Ray and Tova Byrne.
What a lovely headstone this is. My son-in-law really outdid himself again. On the back is the song that I love to sing to my sweet husband, Ray. That guy right here. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. It was a long 2.5 years after my honey went over the rainbow in 2017. You never know what to expect, as I was 1.5 years older than Ray. After a certain age, it doesn't matter, and love, true love, is ageless. Let's step back to my beginning, as we really don't know each other yet. I was born in Centralia, Washington on January 9th, 1926, to Osman and Irene Hodge. I attended Centralia schools and graduated from Centralia High School in 1943. I wonder how many people will be at our 80th reunion this year. I went to Centralia Junior College for 2 years during World War II, and then to the University of Washington, where I earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in English and met Ray for the first time. I knew then that Ray was someone special. In 1945, the men came back from the war and attended college with help from the GI Bill. It seemed like there were 10 men for every woman on campus, so you could date every night of the week if you wanted to. It was during this time that my friend Jessie asked me to join her on a double date. I refused. Regardless, 2 young men came to the cooperative house door and asked for me. I was upset that Jessie had sent them, so I stomped down the stairs to say, "Go away." However, when I got to the bottom step, I stopped as I saw Ray, and I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not ready yet." And I hurried back to my room to change clothes for the roller skating party. It was a match. After graduation, I moved to the town of Ferndale to teach. Ray and I continued to see each other occasionally, but our communication dwindled and eventually stopped. Soon Ray was drafted and sent to Korea. Ray and I went our separate ways. After teaching in Ferndale for 4 years, I married Fred H. Webster, and we returned to the Centralia area, Grand Mound to be exact. I was very happy to live closer to my immediate family. I was able to teach west of Grand Mound at Rochester High School and at Maple Lane. I loved being a mom and actively contributing with Cub Scouts and Campfire Girls. I was already a writer, so I formed a group of actors on Mima Prairie, calling them Myanmars. For many years, I directed plays both on Mima Prairie and at the Centralia Evergreen Theater. Here's where I shall pause and let Ray tell you some of his story.
Oh, Tova's quite the character, isn't she? Now you can see where she gets her love for plays, where that came from. Like it says here, I was born September 9th, 1927 in Oklahoma City. On my 13th birthday, our family moved to Seattle, and that's where I graduated from Queen Anne High School at the age of 16. I enrolled and began studies at the University of Washington, but World War II interrupted my stay at UW. So I joined the Navy, where I continued my studies in the Naval Pilots Program. I earned an honorable discharge from the Navy in 1947. I went back to the University of Washington and got my Bachelor of Arts degree for engineering and zoology. It was the second go-around at the UW where I met Tova in 1949. Like she mentioned, we went our separate ways, met and married different people. I guess you could say she sent me out to be trained by another to come home and be perfect for her later. After graduation, I bought and ran a sawmill in Stillwater, Washington called What Else? The Duval sawmill. When the Korean War began, I was drafted into the United States Army, where I served in the 25th Medical Battalion running a dental aid station. The sawmill was managed by a friend of mine while I was away. With my service completed in 1954, I went back to Seattle, where my 35-year career at Boeing started. In 1956, I sold the sawmill and began working primarily in program management as an aerospace engineer. Some of the projects I worked on were the B-52 Stratofortress, the Hickam and Sage projects, AWACS radar, hydrofoil, and space shuttle. I retired from Boeing in 1987 at the age of 60. In 1978, while I was working at Boeing, I built Duval's Depot Village Mobile Home Park virtually by hand. I operated the park for nearly 35 years before selling it in 2012 to the residents. I've always been a history and railroad buff and like to collect old things. I'm known around Old Town Duval as the man who purchased the old 1912 Milwaukee Road Depot building. I've eventually restored it and donated it to the city of Duval in 2004. The building had been located right next to the rail bed, but the city moved it to Depot Park near the police station. Oh, I could go on all day, but hey, let's talk about us. Tova?
Yes, Ray, I will. So you may be wondering, how did I get here? Well, maybe not here, but to Duval. After my first husband passed away, I received a part of a lottery jackpot from my uncle, and I decided to visit Jessie, my blind date friend from college, who'd moved to Israel. Before the visit, Jessie asked me to locate a few friends that she had lost track of. Ray was one of those people. I tracked Ray down and discovered that, among other things, he had gotten a divorce. Ray asked me to contact him when I returned from my trip. I did, and in 1986, we got married. Ray was just beginning to fight to preserve the 1888 Doherty House as a historic landmark and museum when I arrived in Duval. If it wasn't for Ray's efforts and influence with local politicians, we wouldn't have a museum at the Doherty Farmstead on Cherry Valley Road. My interest in history and genealogy led me naturally to join Ray as a leader in the Duval Historical Society. When Ray's museum efforts were eventually successful, he worked on the outbuildings and I jumped right in. A small group of women and I took on the job of cleaning, repairing, furnishing, and decorating the interior of the Doherty House. I have to say, Ray and I were a powerhouse together. When I was in my mid-80s, the Duval Historical Heritage Festival was short of volunteers. So I called on 4 of my children to come as far away as Centralia to help us out. Like today, many of the volunteers here in Duval, we were taught by our elders to be of service. I guess that's where my kids learned the phrase voluntold. In 2012, we were honored as the city's first Volunteers of the Year. In 2013, we served as Grand Marshals in Duval's centennial. We felt so honored to represent our town on Duval's 100th anniversary. We even have a street named after us in Duval that leads to the historic depot we donated to the city. Back to my love of theater. It led me to direct many plays in the Carnation and Duval area. In my mid-80s, I decided to direct one more play at the Snow Valley Senior Center called The Warrior's Husband. We had a cast of about 25, many of whom never had been on stage before. It was an immense undertaking. We pulled it off brilliantly, despite a prop collapsing and finding a substitute for a main actor who'd had a heart attack the night before the performance. Ray?
As I said before, Tova and I both had a love for history and stories about the old days. With Tova doing most of the editing, we helped publish 8 books for the Duval Historical Society, including Digging Duval's Past, The Wagon Wheel, and Just Cogitating. I understand those books have lasted longer than I have and can be found for sale on the table over there. Work of all types was fun for me, and in my free time, I tended up to 200 cattle, cut wood, baled hay, raised fields of corn, had a vegetable garden, and performed the various jobs associated with running an 80-acre farm. The property is still alive and thriving, with help from Leo, the gatekeeper, and my son, Chet. Our place is located east of the Red Barn pictured on this year's Chamber Business Directory. You may not see the White House with the red metal roof as you buzz north, but just north of the new creek bed, you can see our rustic moss decor farm truck camouflaged within the trees. Over the years, the hard work paid off, and Tova and I didn't need a lot, so we were happy to help out where we could. I guess it's okay now to talk about our donations to the Senior Center down in Carnation, the Duval Historical Society, Duval Cultural Commission, and we are most proud of the college scholarships we were able to fund for Cedar Crest High School students. We also donated the public restroom at Depot Park. I suppose we donated a fair amount of our time too. Some people may have appreciated it more than others. I was chair of the Duval Planning Commission for 20 years and was an active leader at the Snow Valley Senior Center. Tova also volunteered at the Senior Center. I think she was probably on just about every volunteer group there was around here. The Historical Society, Duval Cultural Commission, and Civic Club are a few. We attended just about every city council meeting we could and got to know our King County Council and Washington State government officials. We made many a trip to Olympia to meet with politicians. Finally, I ran out of gas, and at the age of 90, I peacefully passed away, January 26, 2017. My final words to you all as I fade back with my beautiful bride, Tova, is remember your civic and community duty as you drive up Main Street and see the sign that reads Northwest Buren Way. Well, Tova, would you kindly wrap this up?
I have to tell you, I am so grateful I was able to spend the last 30 years in this town. Finally, at the age of 93, I made my final performance, passing away peacefully in our home in Duval on May 21st, 2019. Thank you for supporting my love for theater and for my love for the town of Duval as I make my final curtsy. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move to the Clarks, and how we'll introduce them is that Jason will just start playing the violin and then go into the script.
Okay. I think I'm first. Do you want him to go first or me?
What do you two feel comfortable with?
It might make sense for him to go first, since I don't really have much. There's not much on Cena out there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go back and forth this like the Burns.
Yes.
But I don't know. People might wonder why he's playing the violin unless he starts talking.
Well, theatrically, it would work if he was playing the violin, people gathered, and then just as he's slowing down, you came in.
Oh, okay.
There would be a great entrance for you on a cinematic level, as it were.
Well, I defer to your judgment and your expertise, because I don't know. All right. Well, then
I just make it all up.
That's great. Yeah.
All right. My name is Tina Virginia Clark. I was born on June 8, 1860 in Marion County, Iowa. My parents were farmers, and I stayed with them until I was 31 years old. At that time, I took the train out to Seattle to join my brother Clinton. I worked in the Seattle Laundry at first, but began teaching school in Cherry Valley in 1892 or 93. I can't seem to remember. I loved teaching. It was a bit of a challenge when children were pulled out of school to help with the harvest, farm chores, but that was normal life. When the children could attend school, they made their way by foot, horseback, and some even crossed the river in canoes. The pay was just $38 a month, which wasn't much then, and it's not much now. It's about $1,000 in today's money. Only 3 years after I started teaching, I married Milo. We wanted a family right away, so that meant it was time for me to retire from teaching. They didn't really have substitute teachers like we do today, or you do today, so it was necessary that I go. Our first child, Mary Louise, was born in 1896, almost exactly a year after we got married. Our son, John Ballard, came the year later in 1897, and then Harrison Franklin 1 year later in 1898, and then finally Burrell came along in 1901. 3 of our 4 children are buried here at Novelty, a place that means so much to us. I lived a good long time. After my Milo died of the flu in 1918, my children stayed close. We farmed the land and lived our lives in Duval. By 1950, my daughter Mary had her own house and family next door to me, while Burrell and I stayed in the main house. John and his wife lived right next to us too. Our properties were lined up in a row. It was a joy to have most of my children and grandchildren with me my whole life. In 1957, at the age of 96, I joined my Milo.
My name is Milo Curtis Clark, and I was born in 1863 in Trumbull County, Ohio. I stayed with my family until I came west by wagon as a young man. When I got to Cherry Valley, I purchased 160 acres at the price of $500 from a homesteader. The property went from near the Novelty School, which is now the Seattle Water Department right away, over to where the Ray Burns lived, which is north of Clemens Creek. That's where all that culvert work was done in 2021. The land extended back to the pole line, including Chris Lotus's place and Lutz's place, and then down to the Snoqualmie River. When I first got the land, I lived in a split cedar shack under the cherry trees. In the evening, I played the fiddle for the local social gatherings in the area. After I married the school teacher, Sina, got to get that right, Ballard in 1895, we built a 2-story home and had 4 children in that house. In the early 1900s, my son and I built the large Clark barn. It's the red one on the west side of the street and pictured on the cover of Duval's Chamber's 2022 business directory. It was very well known for its size because it was built with some 48-foot cedar beams with less than a 2-inch variance from one side to the other. In 1900, I was part of the committee to find their here cemetery. We needed to find a plot of dry ground because the Cherry Valley Pioneer Cemetery at the Doherty farmstead had a very high water table. Most burials at the Pioneer Cemetery included bailing water out of the hole just prior to placing the body down in it. See, the minister and the land custodian would arrange for the burial time for the procession to leave the church, giving the Perkins, the gravedigger, time to bail out the water before the procession arrived. This sort of arrangement wasn't going to last long, so a new cemetery had to be found. Our committee searched high and low, suggestions, investigations, test holes, but always a trickle of water appeared. Then a strange thing happened. Another Duval pioneer by the name of Andrew Peterson had a dream. In it, he saw a huge windfall, and the stump hole where the cedar had once stood was full of pure dry gravel. It was so vivid that the next morning, after chores were done, he struck out throughout the woods of Novelty Hill. He looked, and suddenly there it was, the same exact spot that and a test hole was put down. The test hole was filled with sand and gravel, but no water. Our quest ended right there at this here site. In 1916, my wife and I paid a contractor $1,900 to build a 3-story home just south of Clemens Creek. It was a fine, stately home and is still standing today. But in 1918, not long after the house was completed, I was taken by the Spanish flu. In these parts, it was known as la grippe,
Right.
gripe, third time's a charm. And I'm not the only one in the cemetery that succumbed to it. So many people died in Duval that the theater was used as a temporary morgue. But I'm proud of the work I did when I was alive. Some of my grandchildren and great-grandchildren still live in the area. The homes and barns I built are mostly still standing. In fact, in the 1940s, long after I passed, one of the houses was even moved up the hill on skids to make way for progress. And I'm so also proud the cemetery is still here, still visited, and still treasured to this day. And I can attest to those windfalls of trees. They're everywhere on my property.
The trees come down a lot. Yeah, it's very, and yeah, there's a lot of gravel.
We won't be moving anytime soon.
That was my dog. Sorry. the groan.
You got
Thanks,
tired of
you
my
guys. We're
Yeah.
going to move south in the cemetery near the infant area, the new infant area, to the Pickerings.
All right, I think I go, Bernie goes first, I think, in the script.
And let me just play you a snippet. We're going to play this song before you come in. And let me see, here we go.
Oh, what a shame they gave you the name of Mickey. Where is the rose that grows in repose like you? Lucky the birds and the bees and me, lucky the moth and the violet tree, when they were trod by your bare little feet, there in the morning dew.
That's just a snippet of it, but it's part of the background of their story. All right.
There's a treasury of tales to tell about the years of the farm, but they are for another moment. If I were alive today, I would certainly agree with this song, from which Mildred acquired the nickname Mickey. Mickey, pretty Mickey with your hair of raven hue and your smiling so beguiling, can you blame anyone for falling in love with you? When the dancing daffodils bloom like trumpets around announcing spring, they bring me tender and joyful memories of my sweet bride, Mildred. Although she loves many flowers, the daffodil is Mickey's favorite. I was born on July 17th, 1900, born in Novelty. That's this area right here. My father, Alf, was 31 when I was born, and my mother, Jeanette Pickering, was 26. I was the seventh child of 10, and I had 4 sisters and 5 brothers. In 1913, my dad leased out the Novelty Farm and moved the family to the farm in Chesaw, Washington. We boarded the train at Novelty, and the school let out so everyone could say goodbye to us. Chesaw turned out to be a difficult place to farm, and my brother Roy died of typhoid fever there at the age 17. My mother, Jeanette, said that Chesaw was not a place, but a disease. On January 5th, 1917, our family moved back to the Novelty Farm from Chesaw. I stayed in Chesaw, however, until May with my older brother, Lewis, to help farm. Returning home, one of my favorite activities in the late 1910s was to ride the train from Novelty to Duval for 10 cents and see a silent film at the Duval Theater. Yes, Lon Brown, Duval's first mayor, had a theater on Main Street. Also in that decade, our family encountered another loss when my brother Lester passed away. Lester enlisted in the military and he married Leela Thayer in December of 2017. He then left in June 2018 for the Great War, World War I. Sadly, he died of sickness in France in October 2018 while being treated for an injury in a military hospital. I redirected my sadness into passion for sports, and in 1919, I played for the Duval High School boys basketball team, and we became champions of the Snoqualmie Valley. Jumping ahead, on March 24th, 1928, Mickey and I were married in Redmond, Washington. I was 27 years old and she was 20. We lived for many years with my parents in the farmhouse at the bottom of Novelty Hill. We raised 4 children, Jeanette, John, Larry, and Earl. We worked hard over the years to build our own barns and a house, which we finished around 1932. Soon after the buildings were finished, the dairy herd of Holsteins contracted tuberculosis and had to be destroyed. The government partially compensated us so we could replace the cows. We purchased a Jersey herd because they were cheaper. In 1939, I was appointed to the King County Agricultural Stabilization and Conservation Committee, the ASCS. And when World War II started, Mickey and I tried, unsuccessfully, to keep our devolved Japanese friends and neighbors, the Satos, from being sent to an internment camp. The farming community held their farms so they could return to the farm after the camp. Many interned citizens lost everything. During the war, I served on the draft board committee and for determining eligibility for draft exemption. I passed judgment on the applications for draft deferment for farm workers. On February 21st, 1943, our son Larry Allen was born in Seattle, Washington. He still lives on the family farm today at the bottom of this hill. Larry, where are you? That following year, in November 28, 1944, our son Earl Leroy was born in Kirkland, Washington. In 1956, Larry received a painful injury when a pitchfork went through his foot while forking silage. This was just before his 13th birthday. In 1964, I was then honored for 25 years of service on the King County ASCS. In addition to serving as chairman of the county committee, I was also a member of the King County Planning Commission as their farm representative, Citizens Council for Good Government, and the Washington State Dairy Federation. Soon after all those accomplishments, I decided to retire from farming with 80 head on our 20-acre farm. So I sold the cattle and retired. I lived a good retired life for 9 years, but on April 23rd, 1973, at the age of 72, I had a fall in our barn while working on our hay pulley system. Unfortunately, that is where I passed away. Then they moved me up the hill to here. Once you leave here and head down the hill, look to the right and find the white barn with green trim. That is one of our family barns that is still active today, holding community events and selling pumpkins and Christmas trees. Come visit our farm one of these seasons. It'd be a pleasure to have you.
I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. William Wordsworth. I was born on July 24th, 1907, in eastbound Orcas Island, Washington, to John, age 33, and Grace King, 36, third child of 4, 2 sisters and 1 brother. Most everyone knows me as Mickey, and quite a few first graders from Cherry Valley Elementary as Mrs. Pickering. I learned this Wordsworth poem in elementary school when I was 10 years old and living in Kamloops, British Columbia. At the time, I did not know how that special flower and that poem would be for me. In 1910, I immigrated to Canada. My mother, Grace, was a Canadian citizen, Kamloops, British Columbia. My younger sister, Evie, was born there in 1916 when I was 8, and I spent the next 14 years of my life there. I attended a 1-room schoolhouse and had to walk 3 miles to get to school. And you know what? That means I had to walk 3 miles to get home too. Because of severe winters, me and my brother could only attend school until October, then return to school in May when spring came. We got a horse 4 years after moving to Kamloops and could attend school a little longer. When I was in 7th grade, as school was built closer and I began attending school full time, I had to pass state exams to qualify for high school, but I passed these tests, and there wasn't a high school close to where I lived, so I moved to Mount Vernon to live with my aunt. During my first year in high school, I worked for my room and board. Then my folks moved to Redmond. I was able to live with my family again for my sophomore, junior, and senior years. Saturday nights during the 1920s were always filled with fun for us. We attended weekly dances in Duval, Novelty, Vincent, or even in the Swiss Hall in Monroe. It was the Novelty Dance Hall that we first met. My sister and brother were going to this dance over at Novelty, but I didn't want to go. I had no intention of going, but my mother thought it would work better if I went along too. So they kind of forced me into it. Well, my sister, she was very full of fun person. She says, "Oh, I know somebody I'll bring over and introduce to you." She brought Bernie over and introduced him to me. I was very young. I was just a sophomore in high school. The next week's dance, I was willing to go. Bernie wanted to take me back to my home after the dance. I told him I lived so far away in Redmond. We were the first couple to be married in the Redmond United Methodist Church, which still stands next to the old Redmond School, where I had just graduated 3 years earlier. I wanted to be a very simple wedding, and there was no money for flowers. Our friends and families secretly had something else in mind. We were surprised as we entered the church to find flowers, lots of yellow daffodils. If there was one thing that everyone had growing, it was daffodils. Daffodils decorated the altar. The linen covered tables at the reception were covered with them too. It was a wonderful surprise. In 1928, although I married, I needed to finish my schooling in Bellingham. Against social norms, Bertie tells me he does not want me to have any regrets and supports me returning to school to finish. I graduated in June with my teaching degree. My first teaching job was in a 2-room schoolhouse in Stillwater, where I taught 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. Later, when the 6th through 8th grades were moved to Carnation, I taught the first 5 grades at Stillwater. In 1935, during the Great Depression, I thought we had it relatively well because the farm could provide most of what we needed. In the 1950s, I returned to teach kindergarten at Cherry Valley Elementary. I eventually moved to 1st grade and teach there until retiring in 1970. Thank you. It doesn't say how I died though. So,
Okay, I will find that and add it to it.
okay.
All right, let's travel west down the hill. Watch your step as we're going to go visit the Van Hollies.
Welcome to our final resting place here in Novelty Hill Cemetery. I'm Frank Joseph Van Holly. I was born in 1919 right on the raging river, down in Kerrison, just 5.5 miles due south of modern Snoqualmie Ridge. Now, that old town is just a few foundations buried in the deep woods. When I was 5 years old, my father, Hector, and my mother, Marie, moved our family up here to Duval and settled on Northeast Cherry Valley Road. I lived my entire life in that beautiful spread. I'm a lifelong member of the Holy Innocents Catholic Church and remember catechism classes taught by Kate Doherty and her Cherry Valley Road farmstead home, now open on Sundays, May through September.
Hey everyone, I'm Ruby Rose Van Holly, and I met Frank at a dance in Monroe in the early 1940s. I'm not sure I would describe Frank as the life of the party because when I first met him, he was so shy. I really didn't pay much attention to him, but Frank paid attention to me and came back to the next dance. I started looking forward to seeing him at those dance sessions. When my parents noticed I was talking about this Frank guy more and more, they asked to meet him. I asked Frank to come to the house so we would go to the next dance together. My folks thought he was nice enough man, but really didn't expect any romance, and that this would all blow over. I announced to my parents that Frank asked me to marry him, and my mother went into shock. She couldn't understand and asked me not to marry him. One, because he was a farmer, and two, he was Catholic. My mother made it sound as if he had some terminal illness, but I managed to calm her down. We were married July 5th, 1945. The honeymoon was great, but once we got back to the car, it had a flat tire, so Frank went for help. I was sure he had decided marriage was not for him because it took him a very, very long time to return. But he finally did. Frank was 26 and I was 23.
I'm a quiet, industrious man, served as a volunteer firefighter. Back in the day, it seems all the men served on the fire department. I was even elected commissioner of Duval. I'm also a successor as well as a school bus. I hunted with my brother, with my sons to feed the family. Of course, hunting always in the fall, and I left Ruby and the kids of all that milking. Of course, the power always went out, so Ruby really had her hands full of the children, cows, and life.
We worked our way through 67 years of marriage, and we did a lot of celebrating along the way. I really enjoyed life on the farm and raising 7 children with Frank. With that many kids in my house, life was never boring. We had 4 beautiful children, and then 3 years passed, and God blessed us with twins. 11 years later, God gave me a gift of another son. My children were my salvation because they embraced me and this child with love and support.
Once I retired, logging and commercial fishing, but that's not what I really retirement. After we retired, Ruby and I enjoying around in our motorhome, enjoying the company of our friends along. Plus, we went to Switzerland, not in the motorhome though. People remember me as all having a ready smile and a quick laugh. Never one in a party down. So when I was asked to be a ghost speaker at this here show, I couldn't resist and had to be a part of the fun.
I remember when our local newspaper, the Carnival, reporter reported in their May 1st, 1958 edition that our three-year-old son John was rushed to Monroe Hospital after a tailgate of a truck fell onto his head. The newspaper reported that it took 15 stitches to fix the wound on his head, and he was sporting a turban all that week. Thank goodness for Duval Historical Society's website, where we can look up all the retired newspapers of yesteryear. Their digitized newspapers go all the way back to 1911. It's fun to read what was going on in Duval in those days. I must add, I never regretted marrying Frank, even though he was Catholic.
This Cherry Valley road spread that I was raised with my sibling has stayed in my family 5 generations. I'm also very proud of my 2 sons. One went to Vietnam and one Seabees. My Ruby passed away on April 17th, 2012. 32 days later, I joined her on May 19th, 2012. Thank you much for visiting us at this year's Twilight Tour. How about a round of applause for Country Roni putting all this together? If you ever want to come and see what we're, just come up and Ruby and I will be here. Happy to see you. Fade to black.
Yay!
Oh my gosh, what a treat. Oh, this is wonderful. Oh,
Yeah,
Thank
so
you,
we are
Country.
at 15 minutes. So we'll include playing the song, the fiddle, and moving from site to site. We will have over an hour of a show, which is going to be fabulous.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fabulous. So I was thinking about, how we move in and out. So we're starting with the Burens. I really hope I don't say that H. I don't even know how it comes out of my mouth, but Burns. Burn.
Burn or Bjorn? Burn.
Burn.
I'm just
I have
gonna
to
say
learn
burn.
it too. Yeah.
Burn.
Burn.
Like
Burn.
second degree.
Okay.
Yes. Burn.
Burn. And so I'm thinking that the characters travel with us in the crowd and then they walk out of the crowd as they're in their spot. Does everybody feel comfortable with that?
Can you say that again? What do you mean?
Yes,
Cut
ma'am.
out.
So you will travel with us. You'll just be a observer during the other performances.
Okay.
And then you'll walk out of the crowd. When we go to the Clarks, Jason will walk out playing the fiddle, and then Nicole will follow him and start her procession. And then we have the Pickerings that will get to their spot. They'll walk out of the crowd and then start their discussion. And then it's really, we all travel together. They reconvene and join the group after the Pickerings, and we all walk down to the Van Holleys. Does
Great
that sound
idea.
okay?
Yeah. I was thinking
Good
it'd be
plan.
really sweet to have to have the Pickerings have like some daffodils. And I'm thinking of I want to place some roses on, but Ruby Rose, I'm going to look for some dark red rose that I'm going to place on I don't know, something like that.
What a great
Yes.
thought.
No,
I don't know.
I will get flowers to place on each spot.
Yeah.
I will make sure, I'm gonna contact Shotzi at Duval Flowers
Oh yeah.
to
great.
get daffodils, and I'll get your red roses, Nina.
Yeah. Just,
Great idea, Nina.
yeah.
Does anybody have any, because the Clarks were dairy farmers, does anybody have any like old glass milk bottles I could put in the basket maybe to signal that they were dairy farmers?
We can borrow those out of the Doherty house. How's that? In the
good.
kitchen there?
Okay, I've got some burlap I can stuff in the basket with some apples too. Not for my trees because I didn't get any this year, but I could get some apples to stuff in there.
Mhm.
And maybe some blackberries and in with the
Or
milk bottles or blueberries. Yes.
Or
I picked blueberries yesterday.
Um,
Daddy ate all of them.
Of course it is.
My dad ate all of them.
Isn't that why you picked them?
And Frank and I were thinking of when we begin to, since we met on the dance floor, I'll curtsy, he'll bow, and maybe do a little twirl at the end or something like that. Tiny
Yes.
little moment of,
togetherness. And Philip, when talking to the family, I discovered that Frank always wore rubber boots, summer, winter, whatever. And I know you had talked about combat boots because the pants were short. Do you have black rubber boots? Otherwise, what's your size? And I will find you a pair.
I have wellies from Britain.
Okay. Because that was
I have black rubber boots.
Yeah.
That was his outfit.
That was his outfit.
And in this part of the country, are the pants or the inside of this?
Inside. For
You
me.
got Got it.
Yeah. Okay.
I was thinking, I hope I don't end up.
Be as funny.
crying. It's going to be so sweet.
We all are going to be crying.
Well, I'm just like thinking about like putting this stuff on. I mean, it's like how nice. This is really beautiful. I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Me too.
Me too. It's an honor.
You kind of look like her. Did you know that?
And that's what the country said. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Stephanie will be there. She and her husband Greg run the farm now, and you look like Stephanie too. Stephanie looks very much like her grandparents.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really neat. And
You do. When I put your pictures together on the program, I'm like,
dead
oh
ringer.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. There will be family there. Maybe not for Tova or Ray. I don't know where Chet will be during that weekend, but
And we'll meet a little earlier. We'll get there a little earlier to just.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
time, country?
I would say 6 and we'll hang
Okay,
out in
perfect.
the shed,
Good.
if that's all right.
It's great.
Yep.
Oh, where should as performers?
Yeah. Was that a question?
Yeah, where should we park as performers?
Oh, so how we drove in before and we went up to the green shed, y'all can park by the green shed.
Oh, okay.
Remember
Park
where the circle was,
there.
that side? That's where the standard parking is. Yep. Everybody, I know Sandy, I'm dropping off glasses. I just haven't got the glass out of the frame yet. And I don't want to embarrass myself by showing you how thick my glasses are. Everybody okay with costume otherwise?
I think I'm gonna find some shoes that work and
Okay.
yeah, good. My hair, is it okay if I leave it down? Should we put it up or?
Do you
Yeah.
have a photo? I can send you the photo of them.
I do, yeah.
Okay.
And her hair's up in the photo, but I think I'm gonna leave it down.
I
I'm
say what makes you feel comfortable. And like Nicole said, you do look like the Pickering girls that live on the farm with your hair down, because
Yeah.
the Pickering girls are my age and
Yeah,
they
okay.
always wear their hair down.
Okay.
She had very curly hair, so I'll put curlers in the night before. Her hair is actually a lot like Nina's.
Like it goes,
Really?
it goes like smooth.
Yeah.
It goes like smooth, and then it goes like to like move lines like to.
There's a photo of Sina from like when she was maybe 19 or 20, when she was very young, and her hair is very much like Nina's.
Will you
but
send that to me?
Yeah. I
Is
can
that
find it
on
for you.
Ancestry?
It is. Yeah. I think I made that tree public. And I can look up how Ashley's character passed too, because I have that link. Because we don't know what year she died. But yeah, the death certificates are available.